Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our second Greenlight Podcast. We really kind of should think about a better name for that. I was thinking something like, red light, green light, or, turn on the green light. Because
no, it's horrible.
No, it's horrible. Okay, we'll shop that a little later.
We'll work on that. We'll get back to you on the next.
My name is Goldenberg. I'm the host for this podcast. Hopefully, you all met me back in the first one that we released at the end of 2023, where I spoke to our CEO Shemez Hamani and one of our senior developers and Gen AI gurus, Yash Brombat. We talked a little bit about generative AI, where we see it adding value, the impact on the market, some of the trends and challenges coming with it. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, please take some time to go check it out. We'll put a link to the description below so that you can click on that and go see what it was all about. For today's conversation, we're going to branch off a little bit from that first one with a little bit more focus on the automation side of things. So we're going to be talking a little bit more around intelligent automation, what it is, how it's different from robotic process automation, what benefits it brings to organizations, the increasing complexity of processes that it enables, where and how humans can work together with it, and sort of the impacts to the workforce. We have a couple examples that we can provide with this as well as we go through. But just to kind of introduce my co-host here with me today, I'm joined by a good friend of mine, one of Greenlight's account executives, Anthony Kalcounis. So Anthony, it's a pleasure having you here with me today. And I would like to start out by thank you for letting us come into your beautiful home here and do this recording.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Perfect. Well, let's set a little bit of the stage for what this conversation is going to be. So what we want to first do is elaborate a little bit on the distinction between robotic process automation and intelligent automation, and kind of what factors are leading to this whole sort of transition from RPA to IA. So bit of a background, RPA kind of as a technology group, it's been around for around 20 years or so, focusing primarily on working through like rules-based activities, handling and manipulating structured data, interacting with basically any sort of application or interface. But one limiting factor for it has always been that it really can't learn from its past actions, right? Once you've set it up, that's what it's going to do. You can change that, but it's hard to change live, or you can't really just do it based on something coming in, making some sort of corrective action, and it learning from that. So that, of course, means it's quite rigid. Any sort of changes to the applications or data upstream can cause issues with it. That's going to lead, of course, to more development time. And if you haven't put in any sort of exception handling in place, that's really going to cause a little bit of a bottleneck upstream, and people are going to have to jump on and start to deal with that. Intelligent automation, on the other hand, which kind of includes services and capabilities like AI, machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision, they can handle more complex data with a lot less structure. They're able to make judgment calls, and more importantly, many of them can learn over time. So a lot of these models, they have capabilities that get built into them with user-friendly front-end interfaces that people can make adjustments, make corrections, and the model's actually going to learn from that and start to get better over time. So that reduces, of course, a lot of the effort on the development team, enables business users to be able to train them, and makes it a little bit more, business friendly in the end. So you're not having to worry about necessarily having all these really high costly resources like data scientists to do everything for you. You can really start to get business users that know the business process, get them involved in it, and have them help to do a little bit of that training. So and I touched on this a little bit, but a high level kind of overview of some of those intelligent automation capabilities would be things like intelligent document processing. Tons of organizations use this sort of stuff today. It's used to read semi-structured documents like an invoice, a utility bill. It could be an ID card like a driver's license or a passport. And it'll read all the information off that. It recognizes what it is, gets that information, pulls that into essentially usable structured data at that point that you can then send to any sort of downstream system. We have natural language processing solutions. So this is around understanding human text, semantics behind it. So things like from digital communications, emails, feedback forms, really kind of understanding like, why is this person contacting us? What's it about? Making sure that we're triaging it to the correct team for them to be able to handle it, or just getting the information out of it to then pass the course down to an automation that can then do something with it. And then some of the big ones, and these are starting to come out a little bit more, and I think we're going to see a big kind of rollout of them this year, are things like chatbots, digital assistants. They're going to use AI, NLP, machine learning, all together, combined, connecting up to your own data sources for your organization. And then there are things that can then live on your employees' workstations. So they're sitting there and they're ready to assist them, right? They're their own personal digital assistant. They can just ask it a question, send it some information, and it's going to perform some work, whether it be that it reaches out to pre-built automations that you have ready to go, or it's going to go peruse all that document information that you have, or if you want to give it access, it can go to the internet and start to look for some information out there, bring that back and present that information to the user so that they can perform whatever work that they might need. Of course, that's just some examples. There's a lot more capabilities that are out there. There's always more coming out every single day, it seems, around this area. But I think that's, that kind of covers a lot of the high level items that are in place. Do you have anything to maybe kind of add to that? Have you seen other sort of capabilities that you think are really important to call out or talk about?
No, I think you've nailed it. It's an exciting time in the space, right? Where this like convergence of AI, Gen AI, ML, automation, integration is all converging into what should make it easier, faster to roll out automations, make them more impactful. But it's not without its complexity and challenges.
No, that's a good way to put it. I think this is a lot of this a new area. Not that AI and ML haven't been around for a while, but I mean, started 2023 when something like ChatGPT kind of went public. That's where there was this sort of big shift. Everyone really started to understand and see, oh, this is what things like Gen AI can actually do. And then now we're starting to see a lot of that AI technology filter in to the platforms that are out there, right? And that's not just automation platforms, but that's going to be essentially any sort of platform that people are using today, any business platform, right?
Every platform is now an AI platform.
Exactly. Yes. And they're all rolling out their own little pieces to it, whether it be that's just managing the data inside of it, or they're going to have their own little chatbot or digital assistant built into it that you're just going to ask it a question, present something to it, and it's going to run off and do that, whether that be data analytics, getting sales information inside of your ERP system. It's just going to bring it all together for you. So maybe along that line, Anthony, so you've been in that sales and tech sector for quite a while. I know you've been in the automation space specifically since about 2018. Can you give any of your thoughts on what factors you think maybe are leading organizations to either transition over to or start their automation journey using intelligent automation as opposed to maybe like traditional process automation?
Yeah, I think 2018 to now feels like a lifetime. There's obviously been a lot of change and transformation in the space. I think back in 2018, we were very much talking about, RPA, simple, high volume rules based transformation or automations. I think number one, the focus that I've seen is just this refocusing away from automation for the sake of automation, really onto more business transformation.
Right.
The early efforts back in 2018 in my experience were really focused on like cost drive out, reduction in force, those types of levers. And I feel like a lot of that work's been done. And more importantly for business leaders, that was really a one-time benefit, right? Now the real value is in doing things better, is in communicating faster with customers, better interactions with employees, better experiences for your executives, your shareholders, et cetera. And I think that's more exciting for everyone. It's more exciting for customers. It's more exciting for technologists. It's more exciting for employees and shareholders. I think the second piece is really this move to like much more human-centric automation. You could call it human in the loop, or
bringing people back into that
assistant-based automation. Right. Exactly. So like actual transformation can't happen without people, right? And those people have to be involved in the decision-making. They need to be part of the experience of the automation, whether they're customers or staff or executives. They're always going to be the most important part of the equation. So let the scripts, assistants, automations, robots, whatever you call them, let them do the heavy lifting so that the people can actually do the creative work. And then I think the last piece that's creating this shift from sort of, RPA, if you will, traditional RPA over to intelligent automation is just really that things are becoming more complex, right? The complexity is a big part. So we're moving away from high volume, rules-based, rigid, structured type automations into more, complex transformations, more holistic things like specific customer challenges or journeys or different scenarios. And those types of transformations don't exist in an application or a technology stack. They're really end to end across the organization. And so when you're going from one tool to another tool, from the ERP to the CRM back around, it's just more complex. And so you need kind of more capable tools to help navigate those real complex problems that companies are facing today.
Yeah. And do you find some of that complexity, is it because we're moving more away from, like, traditionally you would have, you can call in or you can contact this org and you can do this thing, you can make this one request, do this, a change of address or add this service. And that was really like, here's this one fine line or this path that you would take. Whereas now it's a lot of the conversations and the requests they're a lot bigger. Like, I don't just need this service. I need this service, but I also need it because I'm trying to enable these other things that I'm also trying to do, which also is then going to have these additional pieces that I need out of that as well. So building a lot more of that complex piece, like you're saying, to be able to handle because of customer needs changing, right? Or employee needs even. It's just basically people needs overall are getting more complex. And therefore the process underneath need to be more complex.
Yeah, I think part of it is people, whether they're your employees or your customers, they're more sophisticated with technology now. So their expectations are different. And to your point, it's really about, hey, I have this challenge that I need solving. But there's an opportunity there, not just to fix the issue that they're having. Maybe it's an address change or move or something. It's also an opportunity there to, optimize what your service is to them, right? Call it upselling, cross-selling, whatever it is. And that's really where the magic, I think, of transformation happens. This is not about having robots or scripts or automation do this faster necessarily. This is about transforming the employee and customer experience. And you only do that by actually looking at, the customer or the stakeholder group in its entirety. And then automation becomes a lever to help you service those customers better. It's not about changing the address. It's about how do you service the customer or the employee or one of your partners better.
Good. So actually, then maybe that brings us towards a question 2 that I have here. So from our conversations with both existing clients, prospective clients, it feels for the most part that organizations are starting to kind of understand a lot of this. They're slowly getting into that the more advanced automation aspect of things, understand what some of the capabilities are that are out there. But what they struggle with is how they can utilize them to enhance their business processes, right? They know how things happen today. Here's how they've always done it. So now trying to take that and understand, well, it doesn't have to be done that way, right? You can do it a different way by taking advantage of some of this advanced automation to be able to enable your people to do some more of that high level work. Maybe they're handling some of those exceptions a little bit more hands-on, white glove service type idea, while the automations take care of the more mundane stuff, but then also putting in those intelligent capabilities that really let the automation take care of some of those high level things that you're talking about. So I think some of that struggle that organizations see, it comes from the fact that, like I said, everyone's used to looking at automation as, oh, here's this rules that it needs to follow. It has to do this path, these decisions. It could just be data gathering. It could be a data entry thing, but it's a very basic thing. So helping them shift that view and understand a little bit more of here, no, that's table stakes. Like everything just does that at this point, and not even just automation platforms. Essentially every platform has its own sort of like little bits of automation inside of it now. So it's now really trying to move them away from that and help them understand like this can be so much more, right? They need to start looking at those, integrating those intelligent automation services into their existing processes, into that technology stack, so we can access information much easier, which then it can provide some analytics that you can then use to make those next business decisions going forward. And these tasks become a lot more complex. So really like helping them understand what that looks like and what that can actually do. I enjoy being part of those conversations when we have them with clients, but I find it's often that's where they struggle the most, is really trying to get around that sort of concept, right? And a lot of times it could just be because they're so buried in all the other work that they have to do that they can't rise above it to be able to see what's actually going on. Any thoughts that you've seen around like why organizations may struggle in some of those areas?
Yeah, I think you nailed some of the challenges. I think it really comes down to just the complexity of what they're doing, right? At this point, AI, ML, Gen AI are kind of like, they have the attention of the CFOs and the executives. It's kind of like the buzzword bingo of the day, much like RPA was 5 years ago. And certainly every platform is telling them that, right? So they're being bombarded by that messaging. But I think what organizations are really struggling with is not the how, like how do we implement it? Some of them are jumping to the how when they don't even know the why behind it, right? Like why are we doing this? Why is this fundamental? Why is this important to us? Why does this need to be a strategic priority going forward? And I think organizations that really nail that question of why, and they have much better alignment from kind of executive down to all their functions. And then ultimately the next question is who to partner with on the journey. Those are the ones that really do well. So just the complexity of it and kind of where we're at from a just technology space is kind of distracting. I think the second piece is really this like concept of like, a culture of data or like a data culture. LLMs and LAMs require a massive amount of data to like learn and be better and like provide positive outcomes. And so I think not all organizations have this strong data culture. So they're kind of jumping in feet first, but they don't actually track some of this information. They don't know why it's relevant. They don't know why it's important. So I think aligning, intelligent automation or customer transformation to this concept of like, are we a data culture first? I think is really important. And then if they know kind of what they track and why it's important, then intelligent automation just becomes a lever to get there quicker. Right. But they've got to nail that. And like what's the quote? Like culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think in this case, it's relevant too. And then the last sort of challenge, I think, is just kind of like change management. It's not so much resistance to change. I think we're through that. Like in 2018, we were explaining to people why automation was important and why they should do it. And we had to be very sensitive because people thought robots were coming to take their jobs. I don't think we do that anymore. I think the bigger challenge is just how organizations are managing change management. I think we're past the resistance of change. And now I think many people in organizations are coming at solving the same problem, but they're coming at it from different ways with different solutions. I think part of that is on the responsibility of technology vendors, because every vendor wants to be relevant to the conversation. And certainly technology vendors are no longer selling through IT. They're selling to the business. So now you have a CFO who's talking to one technology partner, the controller who's talking to another technology partner, the AR group talking to another, and everyone has a different view on the same problem. And so I think that's creating some resistance in organizations because everyone thinks they have the solution. So I think you have to look at it holistically, and you have to look at it culturally, and you need to get executives bought into that conversation early so that they can set the tone and strategy for here's why we're doing it. And then the how becomes less disjointed. It becomes more, I think it becomes more consistent and easy to follow. Right.
Yeah. So you have all these different facets that everyone's looking through for how they can address it.
Different lenses, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's got an old, yeah.
And every, like you say, every solution out there under the sun, every application is, hey, we can do this for you. Here's how we can do it. But they all take different approaches to it. And depending on what it is, in some cases it may just be, well, we already have this solution in place. Let's just leverage it for what it can do. Sometimes that's the right approach. Sometimes it's not going to do exactly what we want, and you're trying to fit that square peg into the round hole, right?
And they're all coming at it. Let's face it. There's a bucket for transformation, so everyone's competing for the same dollars.
Yeah.
But in some cases, these technologies, these solutions are actually like quite competitive and almost disruptive to each other, right? So I think you need early alignment to what that looks like. And then, have the organization land on a strategy going forward.
Perfect. So yeah, why don't we move on to the next question, which I think will still follow along the same sort of path. But what about some of the different industries and sectors that you're focusing on right now? Do you see, or where do you see the most benefit from implementing intelligent automation? Are there any specific common processes that you're constantly seeing come up in your conversations? Are these ones that organizations should focus on? Are they great value ones? What's that kind of like first foray into this technology really look like for a lot of these organizations?
Yeah, so from an industry perspective, I think it's really across the board. We tend to focus on some core industries. Banking financial services was obviously an early adopter of RPA, which means they're now sort of they're on the front edge of the intelligent automation piece. Retail, logistics, energy, utilities, those are all some common. I think the more interesting conversation is, I think, RPA was really about back office common processes. So almost always started in finance, right? Because controllers' challenges in a retail company are similar to controllers' challenges in any other company. I think where intelligent automation is starting to heat up and get really exciting is it's much more about moving into the business in the mid office or the front office of the business. So you're getting much more close to the end product, the customer, just because of the capabilities, right? The capabilities around decision making, the capabilities around ingesting data and making, business level decisions around them. The speed at which you can do this in the IA space versus the RPA space makes it exciting. So in the retail space, we're moving out of sort of inventory and supply chain and finance, and we're moving into store operations and customer interactions. In the energy space, we're moving, out of customer billing or out of finance, we're moving into field operations. We're moving into, customer interactions, truck rolls, things like that. In finance, in banking, we're moving out of back office operations, moving into onboarding of customers, customer journeys, cross-selling to customers. So I think it's more about becoming more customer centric, because I think IA gives you more levers to pull and be much more kind of customer interactive.
Yeah, I think that flows quite well into the next question. We're going to talk a little bit maybe about some real world examples, but to that point is we're starting to see a lot of contact center get more involved with this type of technology, right? and you typically think like when you're looking at automation, like contact center, or like, oh yeah, they could just have some very basic automations where maybe agents can click on something and it'll run off, and going back to our earlier examples of do an address change or maybe update their payment information. But now with a lot of the intelligent pieces in there, what we're actually starting to see is you have these chatbots that customers are initially having conversations with. It's going off and retrieving all their information from their profile. And then if it can't resolve it for them, which in a lot of cases it can now because it has access to the data and information and systems, it can basically just run off and do all that work. But let's say it can't, it passes off to a person. Well, now what it's doing is it's just providing all that information straight to that agent, giving them a single pane of glass. And then inside that view, agents now have access to be able to basically do almost anything that they need. They don't have to worry about the 5, 10, 15 different applications that they typically have to jump between to be able to do their work or resolve an issue for a client or add a service. Now they're just being able to work within that single one and kick off an automation that's going to run off, do some work, come back, ask them some more questions. Maybe it's doing a credit check for them. And it's going to provide, whatever that output is. It's going to request some inputs as well, just about the customer. You can have it actually run off and do some of the back office work where it's doing some of that, like address changes and other things. But then it's also able to now analyze those customer profiles and say, hey, maybe this customer is a great one to be able to sell this service to, right? We can see that based on their spending habits or based on, something that's recently changed in their account, information that we have access to, that we should present them with this service or this offering to be able to add to their account for them. And so you get all of that data analytics that this intelligent automation is doing behind the scenes as well. So it's being able to go to, like you say, towards being a bit more customer centric with the automation and the intelligent capabilities. I think we're starting to see a lot more. And for what it's worth, like to anybody that's had to contact a call center, like phone into anything, you're always talking to a robot first, right? You're never getting to a person. It's either you're in an IVR system, you're in a bot system of some sort, and it's doing whatever it can do before it typically connects you to an agent to be able to continue on from there.
And everyone's pet peeve, right? The IVR, I punched in my account number in the IVR system. I get to the agent says, hey, what's your account number? Yeah. Right? So getting to that, hey, hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, I have your information on screen. I see it. You're absolutely right. The interaction in the contact center, the customer calls because they have a problem or they have a need. They want to change their address. But the real opportunity there is to optimize their service bundle, right? Cross-sell them something. Hey, I noticed that you don't have this. That's where IA gets you a lot quicker. Still it's not going to hit the mark 100% of the time. But what it does do is it removes so much of that administrative burden for the agent so that they can actually see customer 360 view. They can send the robot to go manage the address change. And then while they're on the phone with the customer, they can focus on, the quality conversation about how things are going. And, hey, I noticed you're not using this service. And can I upgrade you now? Or I know that you'd be better suited for maybe this other capability that we have. So yeah, that's the real magic. That's where everyone's trying to get to. The reality is there are companies that are doing a very good job of this today because they're leveraging the technologies that are available to them. And there are lots of companies that have some catch up to do. The reality is if you don't do an excellent job of customer service and customer interaction, the only play you're going to have is to be a low cost provider, right? So it's like companies that are going to nail this are the ones that are going to survive because it's, the ability or the barriers to changing a service provider or buying a different product are so low now that if you're not hitting customer service, and it's not even customer service, it's really like, I call it customer intimacy, but like customer interaction out of the park, then it's just a zero sum game. You're going to be chasing customers the whole time.
Yeah. One other example I wanted to kind of maybe provide in this space of where we've seen some of these intelligent capabilities come into play. So I'm going to go back to the contact center again, but it's a little bit of a different view. So instead of talking to people on the phone, it's actually going through their the requests that come in via email, a feedback form, anything like that. And it's using things like natural language processing to understand what the customer's contacting you about, making sure that it gets to the right team. I talked about this at the start of the podcast, but like doing that triaging and then having that automation underneath. So we
also, what's the sentiment? Like, is the customer
are
happy,
they
sad,
happy? Are they
indifferent?
unhappy?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So we're seeing this with some insurance companies that we're working with. They're one of the ones that are kind of trying to be first to the game because a lot of what they deal with is email, right? People are contacting all the time about policies, doing changes to their policy, adding policies. So it's something where we're really starting to see that take off. And so the way it kind of works is, that email comes in and you just have this model that's in there watching that information. So it doesn't read the email, just pulls that information into it, but then it reads all the text. So it gets an understanding of why you're contacting them, what your sentiment is. And it actually is starting to be able to pull out the information from it. So you're going to have certain entities in there. Those could be, your policy number, your name, your address, what you're trying to actually do. There's themes kind of built around all that. And it can extract all that information out. And now you can do something with that, right? So you basically have this completely unstructured communication that came in. And you've now actually taken that and ripped it into structured information that you can utilize. So now you can take that and either pass that over to an agent if they need to handle it. Maybe there's just some exception reason or escalated reason they should, or you can actually take that and actually pass it off to one of those intelligent automation capabilities and have it go do that work. Whether that be that it just processes in the back system, it may follow up with that customer and ask them for some more clarifying information. Maybe they forgot to provide like the policy number in the email was just their name and they need to confirm who it is. But things like that, these automations can just take care of all of that, and it'll actually run through with it, process everything for them, and even send that final response back. And now usually we tend to say is like, hey, don't do an automatic response back to the customer. Maybe not until you're really confident with it. Instead, just go ahead and have it write the email, and then maybe somebody's in there to review it. And that review is just simply them taking a quick look at it. They click approve, and then it sends it off to go at that point to the customer. So you're getting, like you say, a little bit more of that. I don't know if that's necessarily customer intimacy there, but it's addressing their issues more quickly. They're getting it resolved like in the first time. So that first call resolution, it's being completed as fast as it's able to. And we're not having to have this constant back and forth with clients anymore around, like what it takes to get something completed.
Yeah, and I think in that case in particular, if the agent or the employee, if you never sent an automated email, but you just had the automation do all the heavy lifting, experience would tell you that nearly every customer interaction is going to improve upon that point, right? Because your employees, your agents, your customer service reps, they're just going to have they're going to have all of the information in one place. Two, they're going to have more time in the day to craft a higher quality response. And three, to look to areas to optimize or solve maybe challenges that the customer didn't even know existed, right? So yeah, like I'm all for automating everything as long as it's going to improve the customer interaction.
Don't automate just for the sake of automating.
Don't automate for the sake
have
of
that value and that reason why. Yeah. I've got one final example that I wanted to kind of run through. And this one, we have this posted up on our website. We've had talks with automation platforms about this. We've been on stage talking about this. So it actually falls around some work that we did with Canon USA. So this is around intelligent document processing, which for what it's worth, this is like the biggest sort of intelligent automation capability that we see get out there. So this is, again, talking around reading semi-structured, unstructured, or even fully structured like forms, invoices, passports, licenses, whatever that document type might be. So reading them in, extracting the information, and doing some work with it. So we started working with Canon about 2.5, 3 years ago. We actually were brought in as kind of a rescue effort for them. So they had a previous partner that had implemented they implemented a dumb invoicing process. I'm using the word dumb here in that it was dumb without any intelligence, right? Not that they did anything wrong with it. It was just, it had no intelligence behind it.
To be clear, you're not calling it dumb.
I'm not calling it dumb.
You're
I'm
just
not calling
saying
them dumb. I'm saying the automation was a dumb automation. Do this thing, and that's it. But it was always doing, it was just using regex to try and classify the types of invoices, extract the information out of them. And if I remember correctly, it was less than like 30% of the invoices that they were processing were going what we call straight through processing. So no human interaction required. It actually would get everything out that needed. So less than 30%, but that was only handling like 20 some odd vendors, I believe, that they were going through at the time. And that's out of like 100 to 150 that they see on a typical monthly process that they go through. So there's a lot of exception handling going on. They have a lot of vendors that they're just not dealing with at that point. And so the manual processing really was, while it was of course less because you are dealing with some, it wasn't enough that it was causing any sort of impact. And they're actually looking at that point of ripping that technology out just because it wasn't giving them the value. We came in, so they brought us in to take a look at it. We took about, I think in total, the end-to-end delivery from the time we were keyboard, hands to keyboard, and actually haven't rolled out was about 4 months. I want to say we spent like the first 2 weeks just really trying to understand, okay, what is it doing today and what is it that they're trying to actually do? And then from there, what the result was is we actually ended up with a 90% plus straight through processing on it. So I want to say as well, the initial was around 75 vendors, 60 to 75, somewhere around there, that we started with for a phase one rollout, and 90% of the invoices that it was processing were going straight through without human interaction, and it was hitting everything successfully. From then, what ended up happening was we enabled Canon's finance team, help them understand how to continue to train the model. It's very easy. Basically, every time an exception would pop up, if it didn't know that this was an invoice or it wasn't a vendor that it had dealt with yet, it would send that to a person through a human in the loop functionality. They would take a look at it. They would say, yep, this is an invoice. Here's the fields that maybe it may still have extracted some of them, even if it didn't have that vendor initially. But there might have been some that didn't, or the confidence was a little low because it wasn't quite sure. Maybe that vendor used a different wording or naming convention for things. So we trained them up how to do that training. And then so what they started to do is they kept going at it and dealing with those exceptions. And within, I want to say it was like 6 months later, they had another like 20, 30 vendors that were processing through this successfully. Their straight through processing was over 95%. And in the end, it was saving something like 4,500 to 5,000 hours every year, just based on the work that they're having doing. And it's over like 4,500 some odd invoices a month that they're dealing with. So it was quite a huge impact. And since then, Can's they're continuing on with this technology. They've got some other OCR and IDP type things that are in place. They're ripping those out and replacing it now with this and using, we're in there helping them to kind of get all that set up. But it's like, that's one of the biggest sort of intelligent automation projects that I've seen being that successful, especially that quickly. And a lot of it had to do, one, with the team, our team that went in there, Canon's team that was there with us, that they were kind of very much on board to be able to drive this. We had leadership that was bought into it and helping drive it. And I think that's one of the big things that really helps make intelligent automation successful is you need the right people and the right teams to be bought into it, right? If you have leadership that's like, maybe like we can try it, like you're probably not going to go that far because they're already looking at it from a negative light. If you have people they're on board, they see the value, and we're able to help them understand what that value actually can be and the impact it can be, and then realize it, they're going to see that, they're going to be excited about it because now they can showcase that off, and that's just going to drive even more usage of it throughout the organizations.
Yeah, I love that you chose the Canon one to talk about for a few reasons. One, Canon's an imaging company. They know a thing or two about how to
Yeah.
how to image things, and so they looked to an outside vendor and ultimately Greenlight to help them with that. The other thing is, I think it's a great representation of how intelligent automation has the approach of intelligent automation versus just core RPA, because we didn't mention it, but you were actually a customer of mine, right? Way back. And I don't know if you recall, but we did an invoice project in 2018 or 2019. And back then you had to create a custom template for
Yes.
every single vendor.
Right.
And so back then when a vendor made a change, you had to update the template. And as you brought new vendors on, you had to bring new templates on. And it was quite a heavy lift from a customer perspective.
It was, yeah.
And now how those capabilities have evolved over the last 3 to 5 years has been remarkable. Right now, you kick up a project, you throw documents at it, you let the AI model take a first crack at, I think this is an invoice, I think this is the vendor, I think this is what it looks like, and you train them over time. So I think that's just a great example of how the evolution from RPA to intelligent automation has happened. And then the last piece is that sort of core capability is applicable to every customer.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So companies that are looking to sort of dip their toe, if you will, into, true AI, right? It's a great example where every customer has invoices. They've got an accounts payable department. There are certain invoices that you want eyes on, but there are hundreds or thousands of invoices a month, depending on your size, that just, you don't need to have somebody doing them, or you just need them to have a quick look at it, a quick approval, dependent on whatever criteria you set. So yeah, that's just an awesome one that everybody should look at.
Yeah. And actually, I like the point you brought up of how in 2018, how long it might have taken and the effort that had to go into it versus now. I had done, I want to say it was 3 months ago, I did a little comparison for even just what it was like a year ago to set up an IDP type approach. So I just had a set of invoices, built it out, and took, I understand what I'm doing with it. So it's very quick and easy for me to do. But generally it would take something like, if I want to go through and train about, let's say 100 invoices, between that and set up the flow for it, took me about hour and a half or so to be able to do, right? And then now that's just like, we're not doing any exception handling. I'm just doing a very basic test here. I turned around and with some of the recent updates for a couple of the vendors, I did the same thing. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what we can do now that you've added in this intelligent automation and this sort of like active approach to learning and retraining. And I went in and I did it, and I was able to do it in about 20 minutes. So same number of invoices, being able to just, because you just throw it at it, and it's actually, I didn't have to do anything initially. I just threw the invoices at it, and it just started saying, hey, I know this is an invoice. Here's all the fields based on, here's my base model, but here's all the fields that I'm going to pull out for you. Now, if I want to add fields, very easy for me to do. If I want to remove fields, very easy to do. So it actually took so much of that effort off. And then I turned around like, whoa, this should make it so much faster for us to be able to also deliver, to get this out to clients. And now we're adjusting even on our side. How can we deliver faster, reduce costs to clients that want to get this in place while getting them that value even that much faster?
I'm going to flip a question to you, Lewis. And this wasn't planned, but the promise of true sort of business-led or citizen development is something that vendors talk about all the time. Mm-hmm. With the changes that you just described in the IDP process, are we at the point where actual business users could spin up that project, say in accounts payable, on their own, or are they still going to need technical people either from their automation team or an external vendor to get them there?
I'm going to ask our CRO and CEO to cover their ears. But so if you have the right people, they could do it. They may struggle a little bit, especially if it's their first time, but they definitely could do it. That being said, I still think it's really important for organizations the first time they're doing these sorts of things to bring in the right partner to be able to help them with it, because the partner helps them set best practices, helps them understand the approach that they should be taking. Because it's not just roll out the technology and there you go, it works, right? There's some configuration. You need to understand just even some of the minutia behind it, and the like what that technology actually is trying to do, to be able to understand how you can roll it out further. So I would say, yes, you still want to bring in a partner for at least that first one. That helps you get to that initial phase of really understanding. And even if it's a more complicated process, you may also want to keep partnering. But once you've done that first one, if you want to turn around, let's say you've built it for your finance team, it's to do accounts payable, so invoicing. Now you want to turn around and say, hey, we want to do this for employee onboarding. And as part of that employee onboarding, we actually have to get a scan of their driver's license. Maybe it's a trucking company or something like that, right? So we need to get their driver's license and everything. Well, now you know how to do that, and you've been enabled by your partner to be able to do that. You should now be able to set that up and pull that information in and drive it downstream. Again, you're still going to need technical people. Not saying a business person can't do it. Like even when I worked in the business teams back before, I kind of came down this side of my career, I was still a very technical person. So I could have probably picked a lot of this up and been able to drive it. But I also know that there's a lot of people that I would work with that they could use it, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to implement it per se. So it's kind of a mixed bag in some cases. It really kind of depends on your team. But I would definitely say for sure, just to reiterate it again, is have a partner at least for your first one, maybe two, get those best practices, get enabled. Then you can start to do some of those smaller ones yourself and start to build out the capacity internally.
So I think I heard one, it depends on your team, right? The
Yep.
people that you have in place. I would say that as the tools become more flexible, part of that flexibility comes some complexity and knowing, which lever to pull where. IDP specifically, I think our team is probably the best in the business at it. There are a lot of failed projects, and I think it's probably still at this point best to be bringing in a partner that's maybe a specialized partner in an area like that. But we're getting there, but we're not there yet, is what you're saying. We're getting there.
The technologies get there, yeah, for sure, yeah. And especially with a lot of the intelligent automation type, like chatbots that are coming in and digital assistants that are there, they're going to help accelerate that a lot faster. The flip side to that, of course, some of that is you need to give them access to data and information. That is something where, security, risk and compliance, they're not going to be happy with that. But the good news is that approach is like, as long as you're doing it right, you're going to have the data managed and interact with securely. It's not like it's taking the data and throwing it out in the web for anybody to be able to see. It's all still contained within your environment. So you just need to make sure that the approach that you're taking is following a kind of standard approach, using best practices, and you're not trying to do things without following, your standard guidelines and procedures, right? Still follow your security best practices. Make sure that security is involved. Make sure data management's involved, so they know when that data is being touched, why it's being touched, and how it's being utilized. Because you don't want to go and build something and then find it down the line like, oh, I made a boo-boo, and that may actually have a cost associated with it.
Awesome.
So we mentioned a lot of successes that we've talked about here. I think it's kind of only fair to talk about some of the challenges that businesses might face during whether it be implementation, integration, scaling, whatever kind of aspect of it as it relates kind of to getting some of these intelligent automation pieces in place. I know from my side, I've got like three kind of main things that I see as being a struggle. So first is the business is not selecting processes that are great candidates for it. And this might not lead back a little bit towards you were talking about is like, you don't necessarily want to just look at a process. You want to look more like that journey, that customer journey, whatever. It could be a mortgage journey. It could be customer service for retailer, all the way from the time they get to your site to the time they purchase, even dealing with their longevity of coming back to you again and again for more products. So when businesses don't pick the right process, they have, it ends up being not really that impactful. The ROI is super low. And now the problem ends up being is you really can't like jump out to the rest of the organization and say, look what I did, because it doesn't really show a whole lot there, right? Like it may be good for your team and that there's still value in that, right? Maybe it took some time and effort off of your people. It could be half a day's worth of work, every week or something, right? You're still getting value, but it's not business impacting value. You would need a lot of those small ones to really kind of get there. And the problem is you can't start with a bunch of those small ones. You generally want to start with something like that's at least, it doesn't have to be the biggest thing, but you want something that's at least impactful for the VPs and even potentially the C-suite to at least notice and see, because that's what's going to get them on board to drive it even more as you kind of continue on. So finding that right candidate and process is really kind of key in that area. Second, I would say is that the business process, and actually this is going to go back to a point you made earlier, either the business process or specifically the data that drives it isn't clean or in a ready state, right? You've got your business process has kind of become rife with tribal knowledge. People have built all these workarounds for how to make it work because, well, this application doesn't quite do it, or this system doesn't manage it right, and the data really means this, even though it shows this. But people learn that over time, working in their different roles, and what that ends up doing is that actually kind of puts a stop in being able to automate it, because even being intelligent automation, like tribal knowledge really doesn't work well there, right? And workarounds don't necessarily really work well. You want to be able to understand, like, okay, what is this supposed to be doing from start to finish? How do we manage all that? And if that data isn't clean, it's just going to cause too many problems downstream, right? So that might lead to you having to do some process improvement, some data management improvement before you want to go start looking at some intelligent automation with it. But that'd be an area that, like, I've seen one or two times where that's kind of come up. We start to work on something and then we realize, oh, this data is not good. Like, it's just very bad data. We shouldn't be dealing with this. And either the business has pushed forward with it, or they, we've been able to convince them to realize, and we switch to something that's a little bit more value. I'd say the third reason is the people and the environment aren't ready. So in some cases, that's leadership hasn't given that sort of proper guidance for how they want to use intelligent automation, what they want to use it for, what their vision is, or maybe their risk tolerance is just so low that they're afraid, like, the second that something that's not human is touching this, right, what's going to happen? Are these automations going to go rogue? We've heard that so many times, and they don't go rogue. That's not how that works. But it's just, you don't get the value out of it, especially with a lot of these intelligent automation services. They're cloud-based now, right? Now that can be SaaS, or that could be like an on-prem cloud. But it's still a cloud-based service, and some organizations, especially larger ones they're taking so long to get to, like, current state of technology, they're just not there yet. They're not ready to allow that to happen. And the ones that are, we've started seeing that with some banks, healthcare space, insurance space. They're starting to allow that type of work to come into play. And again, it's not that it's necessarily going to be up on the cloud, like in a SaaS solution, but it is using those cloud services that then lets them be able to do a lot more. The last kind of point to that one too is also, it could just be that, the people that are doing the work aren't ready. This could be your architects, your implementation team, your infrastructure team, change management, security. They don't have the time, the resources to get familiar with all this, right? They have so much work on their plate today. Leadership is not taking the time to say, hey, we're going to cut out X number of hours in your week.
Right.
We understand this is going to cause us to slow down some other places, but we need you to get us future ready to be able to drive forward with this. So giving them that time to be able to do that research, do that training that they need to be able to get started on some of this. And in a lot of cases, some of these, like, technologies, they're not go spend 1 to 2 hours and, hey, you know what you're doing now, right? It's, you actually need to spend probably a good 15, 20 hours just to get through the foundational pieces of it and really understand how it works, let alone some of those advanced pieces where you really start to bring in the intelligent automation parts to it. So it does take a little bit of time. And if they're not given that time to be able to do it, then the business is going to suffer for it.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to just the first point you made on, I think you called it you were talking about the wrong process or a process that isn't impactful. My number one rule is always picking a process that's visible, right? So there's no point automating something for you if it's not visible to the organization,
right? Sort
of regardless of ROI. I think one of the things I've learned is we'll often tell a customer that we're working with, hey, we don't think the ROI on this one's great. And they'll just stop us and they'll say, time out. There may not be an ROI, but it's extremely visible to the organization, right? Maybe it touches the customer, or maybe it touches like annual reporting or quarterly reporting, or there's an audit piece to it or some sort of governance piece. So I think visibility is the most important thing. But I also think that when you're starting out building your intelligent automation practice, we sometimes will go, business leaders will say, well, I'm going to do one automation for this group and one automation for this group and one automation for this group. When from a visibility perspective, sometimes it's better to go into this group and do 5 automations for them.
Yeah, go deeper rather than
go
wider.
deeper, because then there's a great story that you can tell around business transformation, employee transformation, customer satisfaction transformation. So to me, visibility is that's my number one thing, is like, is this automation candidate visible, right? Is it visible outside of the business unit? Maybe the group, and in some cases, is it visible to the customer? Because if it's visible to the customer, then you have a home run.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to bring up a question. We used to often hear this when it came to like sort of process automation in general. Happens a lot less now, but I think with like some of these new AI services and intelligent automation capabilities, it's going to become a little bit more prevalent again. People are going to ask, how will this impact my job? Whether it be out of fear of losing it or, being displaced in some way. Personally, I think they should always ask that question, like when any sort of technology comes in, whether it be automation or anything else, because, at the end, it shouldn't be, how is this going to replace me, or how is this going to change what I do? It's more so, what skills do I now have to learn to take advantage of it, right? To whether it be to benefit myself, to benefit my team. I'm the kind of person that I always think when something like this comes in, it's a great opportunity to grow and learn more. Automation wasn't my thing way back when. I was a QA tester. I did test automation, which kind of got me down this path of starting to do, process automation and some other stuff. But it was never like, the test automation is going to take away what I do as a QA. I was like, well, no, why don't I learn how to do this? I can do it better, which means in the end, I'm going to have less work for myself, but I'm going to be able to do a better job at what I do, right? So I don't know what your thoughts kind of are around that. I know you deal a lot with the customers, that front facing a little bit more maybe than I do at that when you're trying to come into new business units and talking to the teams. Any thoughts kind of around that? Like, do you see this coming back up?
Yeah, no, I think we're seeing it everywhere. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not, intelligent automation is not going to displace it actually is going to displace some jobs, right? Like there's no question that some jobs are going to go away with automation in general, but particular intelligent automation. But I think the real opportunity is, one, how am I going to leverage it to make me better at my job, right? So pick the job. It doesn't matter whether you're a coder. How can I develop code faster? How can I develop code that's more robust? How can I develop code that has less bugs by leveraging automation? You're an accountant, you're whatever. I have a personal example because my daughter's looking at schools right now, and she's going into the sort of the illustration space, right? And I asked the recruiter at the school, I said, how are you integrating AI and Gen AI into your curriculum? And they kind of said, oh, we're not. It's 10 years away from when AI displaces these roles. And I was like, that was the wrong answer. It's not about how much time you have for AI to displace your role. What it really is, how can you start leveraging it to be, more resistant to disruption, really. And that's where things like, prompt engineering come in, and how to ask the right questions of the programs. And this, I'm a believer that, in grade school and in secondary and post-secondary school, they should be teaching kids how to use these technologies,
right,
as opposed to trying to catch the kids that are using the technologies, right? They should teach them how to use it. They should teach them how to challenge it. They should teach them how to question what they're hearing, how to take the good parts and how to throw away the bad parts. So I think it's absolutely, it's going to have a massive impact to everyone's role. I also think it's going to have an impact to technologies. I think there are a lot of technologies that are very niche in a space that exist because they're filling a really niche area. Think of a billing system that's very specific to a type of service provider, something like that. I think those systems will be disrupted because it's very easy now to say, hey, I want you to build a billing system that applies to these 4 or 5 criteria,
right,
in this specific niche. And I think the technology is, maybe it's there, maybe it's not there, but it's very close where you could take a first pass on that. And that's going to be disruptive to technologies and platform providers, which is why I think you see all of them pivoting now to sort of say, hey, we're an AI company, we're leveraging AI. This is our plugin to ChatGPT or other services. But yeah, I think it's here. And I think the real opportunity is, how do you leverage that to be better in your job? How do you leverage it to be, if you're a contractor and you can produce more by leveraging the technology, you'll make more money. Yep. Or you can charge a higher rate. I think that's the real example here. And what business leaders need to look at is, what areas of my business can it touch? Can it impact? It's probably just about every area of the business. And how can we do it not just to save costs, but how can we do it to improve customer service, customer interaction, employee experience, shareholder value, whatever the lever is.
Perfect. I like that.
Okay.
It was a good response. It actually took a lot of the points that I was going to make, and
you're welcome.
I don't deal with them anymore. The whole prompt engineering thing, I'll skip past all that.
But I mean, so on the prompt engineering thing, I mean, for people watching, you know more about prompt engineering than I do. So what is prompt engineering?
Yeah, sure. So just as kind of as a base level, this is something, like you said, people need to learn how this works, and it's really no different than what's been around for a long time anyway. So think back to when Google came in. I mean, it's still being out. If you were to Google something like, my car won't start, how do I fix it? You're just going to get a whole bunch of different responses. And in most cases, it's just going to say, go take it to a mechanic. They'll help you figure it out. But if you instead put in turning the ignition does not do anything, what should I check? It's probably actually going to come back with a lot more responses saying, go check your battery. Maybe your battery is dead.
These are the 3 things.
These are the most common things that it is. Check these first, right? So prompt engineering kind of goes along that same sort of path. Now it's a little bit more built out, but you can't just go into something and ask it, a very simple question of tell me the history of, I don't know, Francis Bacon. It's going to give you a great response. But if you wanted to get into the specifics of it, what was he doing between this time and this time? You're going to get a little bit more fine information in there, right? It's going to get down to more of what you were actually looking for. And that same sort of thing is going to happen with any of these intelligent automation pieces and advanced technology, right? Build me a billing system that does these things. Well, it's going to be fairly wide in what it does, but I need a billing system, and let's assume that here's my parameters for, here's the outputs that I expect, here's what the input should look like. Now you've actually given it a lot of very specific information that it can now build out from that and start to actually give you what you're looking for at a little bit more finer detail. And it's going to be a little bit more specific to what you're actually wanting out of it. So it's something I think everyone should learn, especially like if you're working in a technology space, like just get at least the basics of how to do prompt engineering. It'll help you quite a bit more. And as we see some of these like chatbots start to come in and roll out to things like contact centers, it's going to happen a lot more there. Like they're just going to become more familiar with it and how to utilize it to get the information that they need that much faster.
So relating this back to intelligent automation for, say, our customers, what do you think is the big opportunity for customers? I want to like click on the like GPT model thing for a second. What's the big opportunity for customers? Like, let's say in a contact center, how would you leverage that technology?
Yeah, so I would have, and we see this with some of the platforms that are rolling these out. So something like Microsoft Copilot, just as an example, right? And a lot of these platforms are doing the same thing. But having that digital assistant where it's just sitting on your machine and you can just ask it a question. Now, as long as the organization's connected that up to their internal data so that when you ask that question, it knows to go look at it. But it could be something simple. Let's say you're in that contact center and you're a brand new person that just got hired. You don't have all the tribal knowledge and months or years of experience that some of the senior agents have. So customer calls in, I need to move my address. I'm moving next week. Okay, well, I'm a new person. I remember I kind of learned how to do that, but what are the screens I have to click on? What do I have to do? You can instead just go to your agent, your digital assistant, and say, I need to move this customer, here's their account number, from this address to this address. Now, either A, if you have that automation built already, it's going to run off and go do that for you. Or it can at least prompt you or respond back to you, say, here is the steps for how you do that. Here's the document, but here are all the exact steps that you need to do. So go to the screen, do this, type this, click this, and be able to walk through it. I think that is going to be a huge impact to these contact centers because you've reduced your time to train people. Like really what you should be training people on is how to talk to your customers, not specifically what. Let them build that rapport. And you're just taking a lot of the memorization out of it, in all honesty. Like I remember being a contact center agent way back. Yeah, like I had to remember all these different screens, the different, key presses, working with the green screen of exactly what to do. If I didn't have to do that, I could just, tell this assistant what I need and it runs my automations or does whatever it needs to, or walks me through it at least. That's just that much faster that you can hire people, get them onboarded and get them into the contact center taking calls rather than having to spend like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month training them. You may shorten that to maybe just 2 weeks, right? Or 1 week. So that's where I can see a lot of those kind of impacting maybe in some of those areas.
Yeah.
So let's, why don't we kind of keep that vein of thought going here? How do you see intelligent automation impacting the customer experience? We talked about this a few times and sort of very, high level of you should always be looking to improve the customer experience, but how do you actually see it improving their experience?
I think intelligent automation is all about getting to the solution quicker, right? So having automation, scripts, bots, robots, chatbots, whatever, just all sort of swarm the customer and help the customer. And whether that's a movement to self-service, so the customer can sort of auto-resolve on their own. You give them the answer to their question. I think you touched on it. Understanding the sentiment of the customer is really important. So being able to separate the customers that just have sort of regular questions versus maybe there's a cohort of customers that are really upset about something, and being able to jump into those customer interactions immediately, because the best time to resolve a potential problem is kind of before it becomes a big problem.
Right.
Right. So jumping on those, You touched on it, things like, comms mining and being able to manage kind of emails and structured and semi-structured data and understanding sentiment. And then I think the other piece is just ultimately just helping not just solve the question that the customer has contacted you on, but being able to actually optimize what that service is. So I don't know if you've had this experience, but I had this experience recently where I was calling my cell phone provider. And because I just wanted to deal with my kid's plan. Right. And I was like, I'm calling because my kid's plan is expensive. And, the agent was like, well, hang on a second. Like, let's look at all of your plans. And, came up with this great solution that saved me like, $100 a month because we pooled everything, because he had the information available to him.
Right.
Right. And you could tell he was leveraging technology. I could tell we talked about it because I was interested in it. My experience as a customer was positively positively sort of impacted there. And like, I carry that through months later when I interact with a contact center personally that doesn't have that same approach. And I'm almost like,
why can't you be like them?
Why can't you be like them? You should have this information. And they're like, sir, we don't have this information. I have to transfer you to another group. And I'm like, that's not acceptable. Which comes into the other piece of how it's going to impact is like people's expectations of how they interact with technology providers. Like it's been often said that this is the first time in history where technology in the home is often better than technology that you interact with at work. Right? So your laptop at home used to go to work on the really cool hardware. Now you can do more with your iPhone or your Android or your laptop at home. You can see who's coming at the front door. You can program your TV, and then you go to work and you don't have those same capabilities.
Right.
I think employees are just not going to accept that. And I think the same thing on the customer side, right? When they're interacting with service providers that don't have that same level of sophistication, I think they're going to challenge them. And I think that will become almost as much of a reason of changing service providers.
It's going to stand out to them.
It's going to stand out.
I've had all these problems, and then, I know my friend, they had this interaction. It was great. I'm going to go over there instead. Right.
Yeah. So I think those are all trends just that are going to, they're going to make it very hard for service providers and companies that are not leveraging intelligent automation, because you're just not going to be able to compete on the same level.
Well, I think that brings us to kind of our last point for today's discussion, where we want to talk a little bit about future-looking trends. So this is going to be around where we see it going over the next, let's say 2 to 3 years, right? I think going beyond that, from what we've seen, in the last 2 to 3 years, looking beyond 2 to 3 years right now is going to be a vastly different landscape. Something could come out in the next couple of years that's going to change everything again. So if I look at it, I would say like kind of one of the biggest game changers that I see starting to become available, and they're going to hit the market this year. They're already starting to hit the market, but you're going to see a lot more probably like towards the end of Q2 into Q3. Are those sort of AI-driven chatbots and their integration to intelligent automations. So, it's going to sit on my laptop, your laptop. We're all going to have one. It's going to be sitting there, and it's going to be connected to our internal data. No, like as it stands right now, a lot of times I'm like, I don't know where this document is. I can't remember where we store it, because we have like 3 different or 4 different places to store documents, or all these different group folders that they're all sitting in.
And we're better than most organizations.
Yeah.
Like we are leaner than most organizations. Yeah. It's still hard to figure out where.
Yeah. So if I can just turn around and ask a chatbot, right, and say, hey, where is this document? Or I need to run this model, this sales program, whatever it might be. If it can reach out to our data, to our systems, and say, hey, that document's stored here, or here's how you run that sales process. Here's how you update inside Salesforce or wherever it might be. That's going to reduce the time and effort that I'm spending to try to get to that point. And that's just going to enhance it even further. And then when you see where that could go to lots of other organizations, and whether it be a contact center, whether it be back office, finance, doesn't really matter. Hell, it could be the CEO, right? They're just going to have that sit on their machine. Like, imagine you're the CTO and you just type in your chatbot, where is project X at? And it reaches out to your project program, pulls all the information. It can tell you if it's on time, if they're running behind, if there's any noted roadblocks, things like that, and just present all that to you. Or you can have it go generate you some graphs that actually show you multiple projects going on and what the status are of each. You no longer have to actually have your team members go and do that for you. They just have to make sure the data is available, but you can just pull that yourself now at that point. So I see some of those things coming in, and those are going to start happening over this year, 2024, 2025. You're really going to start to see a lot of that kind of come into play. I don't know if you've got a different view on it. Like, I've got a couple other trends too.
Think I will see your personal chatbot, and I will raise you more of like the personal assistant, where I think what you will see is, kind of like the co-pilots of the world, the autopilots, the co-pilots, where the biggest hurdle is going to be sort of invasion of privacy, but it's where kind of the intersection of like process intelligence and automation, intelligent automation intersect is, hey, I notice you do something every day. It looks like this type of process. We should automate it, or here's a way to make it more efficient. Or if you allow me to connect this data source to this tool, I can save you 3 steps, right? Maybe not on that level of intelligence yet, but I think that's where we're going to is. So I would say level 1 is your chatbot where you can ask it questions. I think level 2 is that true sort of citizen. It's not even citizen development. It's really like automated AI-based development, where that sort of virtual assistant will say, I think there's a better way to do this.
Yeah. Using some data analytics to bring
using some analytics. And there's all kinds of ethical questions there that I think, executives, CIOs, CTOs, COOs will have to deal with. And it'll be on the vendors to sort of navigate that minefield of privacy and how it happens. But I think there's lots of ways to do it. I think the technology's there. I think you're going to see that coming next. And I think some people, some companies, some groups, some business units, and some employees will be open to it and they'll embrace it. Some won't and they'll resist it. But I do think there's an opportunity there for the ones that do embrace it to really take a leap forward in terms of their level of productivity. Because remember, I can't remember who it was. Maybe McKinsey or somebody came out with, I think it was McKinsey, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, came out with a report that said in the last 20 or 30 years, with all of the technical advancement that's gone on, particularly in the business office, productivity's actually gone down. Right. So think about all of cloud and, personal computing and mobility and all of these things that should have made us more productive. The productivity level of the average worker has actually gone down. And part of that is because of the complexity of navigating these systems and where did I put that file, which you talked about, and what's my password? And I can't tell you how many times I have to reset a password in the course of a week. I think a lot of that goes away, right? When as a business culture, we actually embrace intelligent automation. I think the opportunity to just do things better is so much greater.
I think we can start by introducing you to a password manager. It'll help quite a bit with that. I know
it's just password 1, 2, 3, and then it becomes password
1, 2, 3, 4. Exactly. You just keep adding on. It's just going to get more complex.
But then it's exclamation and ampersand and
just keep adding on to it. It's always. I mean, if no one else can access it or no one knows it, then it's secure, right?
If I can't remember it, then what luck will a hacker have?
There was one other trend that I want to, and it kind of touches on some of the stuff we talked about, like with the co-pilots and whatnot. and it's actually around developing whether it be automations or just general applications, coding, whatever it looks like. I know there's sometimes like I have a few friends that are, they're the traditional development coding, whether it be in .NET or they're Python scripters or, whatever that might look like. Some of them embrace some of this, and others are, very much against it. But having those sort of co-pilots and ability to just say, hey, I'm trying to build this thing. And you talked about this a bit earlier, but I need to build this application, or I need to do this process step. And if it can build you the whole scaffolding for that, here's your different activities that you need to do. It may even generate some of that code, right? And that could be directly within code. It could be a 4th generation language, so low code type development. But if it can build all that out for you and even have like, oh, you have to integrate to this system and this data over here, you already have those set up. Like we've already done that, and previously we're just going to use those connections now to build that out. You're saving so much time and effort to be able to do that. And especially for an organization like ours, where we want to be able to come in, deliver the most value to you. And of course, yes, we want to make money, but we also want our costs to be low so that you are going to select us, but also get the highest value from it, right? So having some of these capabilities is definitely going to help with driving some of that. And like I've had a chance to play with a couple of them already, and it's amazing how much work they can pull off. Like something that might take you, let's say 20, 30 minutes to build just some basic pieces, you can have done in like 5 to 10 minutes, just because it's already, oh yeah, here's all your main scaffolding. You're just building the pieces around, and you can just keep adding on to it with more prompt engineering, more questions to it, and just keeps building on top of itself to make it more robust and easier to do. So I'm really kind of looking forward to what this year and next year is going to bring for a lot of that. I definitely see this a bit of an exciting time to be in, work in this cyber space with intelligent automation and with some of these other intelligent capabilities that are coming out. So I think that kind of brings us to the end of the time that we have today. Like I said, it's an exciting area. I can't wait to see what's going to be coming out. Anthony, I do want to thank you very much for joining me today. And again, thank you for letting us all into your beautiful home. Anyone that doesn't know, he just had this all remodeled. It looks fantastic. I know you can't see everything, but it looks great. And as always, to anyone, any one of our listeners, if your organization is looking for a delivery partner with experts who can help you with implementing or expanding your intelligent automation capabilities, please come check us out, greenlightconsulting.com, see the services that we have available to us, or send us an email. You can send it to at iaservices@greenlightconsulting.com. We're happy to talk to you and see how we can support you on your automation journey. And with that, thank you for listening, and keep on automating.